Welcome everybody. This is the seventh webinar in our Be a Better Leader webinar series, and this one is titled Leading Growth Through Business Storytelling. So I'm going to hand it straight over to our host, which is Mark Francis.
You know, I got really lucky just before COVID. I'm lucky because I've got some great friends, and Amanda Downs introduced me to this book. And it was a game changer for me because I am a businessman, I am an influencer, and I'd never been trained in storytelling, certainly wasn't at school. And the book helped me. It helped me to think about how I influence fundamentally. How do I influence? And then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, if you could put yourself all on mute, that'd be really cool. So the interference that we're hearing would stop. So if you could put yourselves on mute, that'd be totally awesome. Thank you. So having read the book, I thought I've got to use it. I've got to try and influence during COVID, which means online, using storytelling as the way. The first opportunity we got as a business and as a training business, we were hugely affected by COVID. We were a face-to-face training business at the time. And so we had to do all of our selling online and all of our training online. Big change for us. And so I thought, come on, try and use the principles that I've learned in this book. And we had an opportunity to sell to a Japanese business who we'd never met. Major client opportunity, trying to sell our wonderful training programs. And as you would expect, if you know anything about Japanese culture, first introductions are very, very formal. So the customer had the MD of their business and 6 other delegates, and they took approximately 10 minutes to introduce themselves to us, and respectfully, we listened. What is then expected, it was passed over to us, and it was me, it was Chester Robinson, and it was our colleague in Japan, Ken Sato. We were the 3, and it was passed over to me as the lead from Uspire. And I said this: I landed in Chicago Airport at 5 a.m. I was collected by a sales engineer, and we drove 6 hours to Michigan to meet a major wholesaler customer for this big business. The sales engineer, on introduction to the MD of this customer, said this, and I quote, "Do you still have time for us?" And the MD said, "Well, now that you mention that, do you know what, it'd be better for the same time next week?" And the engineer said, "Thank you," got in the car, and we drove 6 hours back to Chicago Airport. That's the story I told the Japanese business that have sales engineers who don't sell. They are just technical experts, and they don't really see themselves as salespeople. And the MD really needed to drive the skill of selling. So in response to the story I told, by the way, no introduction, which is not Japanese culture, straight into story. My heart was beating out of my chest through my nerves of trying this method. The head of the Japanese business said this: "The story you have just told is exactly the problem I am facing with my sales engineers. If you have a solution that you use to fix that American business, we will use you as our training company." So story, hook. Now I share that right up front because storytelling is usually, we're going to use chat to check this with my audience. Storytelling is usually something that is not trained. So first of all, using chat, could you put a Y? Yes, I have been formally trained in storytelling, or an N? I've never been training this at school, at college, in business. Yes or no? I'm looking at all of the ones coming through. They're nearly all no. There's a couple of yeses. I mean, we can count them up ourselves, can't we? But I'm looking at the numbers, and it's something like 90% no. So that is the purpose of this webinar, is to introduce the idea that storytelling is not a nice to have. It is essential if you're going to influence somebody, especially if their arms are starting from a folded position and a non-supportive position of your opinion. So storytelling being the key to unlock locked arms. So that's the purpose of this session. And I'm delighted that I'm going to be joined today by a good friend of many, many years. We're not going to say how long, Ace, of many, many years. And the reason I'm delighted Ace is joining us is that she is a professional storyteller. And she's a professional in a number of ways. With the written word, which is a storytelling medium, of course it is, and also as a film producer, film director. She creates and writes adverts, she directs, she writes films. So this is a professional storyteller. And I'm delighted you can join us, Ace, because I'd love to get your insight into why storytelling is important, how to do it. And during this session, we're going to bring to life some of the reasons why storytelling is so important and how to do it. All right. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm using the word Ace to describe my friend because that is the nickname I use for A.D. Cooper as your professional name. Is that right?
Yes, otherwise people just guffaw otherwise. And you can't Google me either.
So if we Googled Alice Cooper, we wouldn't get you.
No, you get some Pratt in America.
So obviously, those of us who are a slightly more mature age know the name. So your professional name is A.D. Cooper.
Yeah.
And I call you Ace because that's what I've called you for 30 years.
Yeah, more.
More than. That dates us a bit. I'd love my first question is definitely about what you currently are doing because it's very relevant to what's been happening in England in the last month or so. So what's the current project, Alice?
The major current project is to make the definitive documentary about how the World Cup started in 1991, mostly because I'm one of the 4 women who were foolish enough to think this was a great idea and why not, let's do it, and how very, very hard it was against this sort of tide of misogyny, no sanction from the International Rugby Football Board, no money, and any number of other challenges. And doing this documentary has been every bit as challenging. And if I'd known how hard it was going to be, I probably wouldn't have started. But anyway, I'm well down the road on it. We've discovered wonderful new stories that no one's ever heard, discovered new footage that no one's ever seen. And it is finding its own sweet time, like all films do. They just find their own time and space.
That's wonderful. And just to bring everyone up to speed, who perhaps doesn't know about rugby or is not English, we've got people from all over the world on this call. The Women's Rugby World Cup was held in England over the last 6 weeks. And at the final last week, there were 82,000 spectators. And because Alice and I were involved in rugby way back at the beginning in the late 1980s, that's quite an achievement for a sport that was, as Alice mentioned, sidelined, ridiculed, dismissed, and certainly not invested in. So it's a marvelous journey we've been on. And what made you so special, Alice, was that you were one of 4 people who said, we're going to set up a global tournament, even though the sports governing body said you're not allowed to. The men on the sports body said, no, we don't want to see women playing rugby. That's not good at all. So it was pretty cool seeing 82,000 people seeing that as not the right way to go forward.
And 5 million viewing figures on the live viewing figures.
We like that.
Largest viewing figures for men or women rugby this year.
We love that. We love that. So now, storytelling. I said earlier before I introduced you, I think it's the essential skill of influencing, particularly to get locked arms unlocked. Why do you think storytelling is so important, Alice?
Well, storytelling just goes back to campfires before television and internet and stuff. Well, how was your day? What did you do last night? How was your weekend? Water cooler chit and chat. And the key to stories is that they have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Situation, complication, resolution. Put Joe up a tree, throw rocks at him, give him the tools to work out how to get down the tree. All of these things. And if you have a story that doesn't have an ending, you're going, I'm cheated. You've taken me all the way down this road. I've gone with you on this journey. And then, so you have to have, and even from a very small child, if you read stories as a child, and if you're lucky enough to have a parent who would take the time, you know, these are all about teaching you lessons. There are life lessons hidden in fairy tales. Child psychologist, especially a very interesting man, very academic man called Bruno Bettelheim, who wrote a book called The Uses of Enchantment. He analyzed fairy tales from all cultures and found they all had the same stories. There are actually only 10 stories. They're all stories fall into 10 story types. And we, you know, without stories, life is dull. I met a lady on the Isle of Wight. Apparently, the Isle of Wight, it's very rude to ask you what you do for a job. And eventually at the end of the weekend, oh, well, then what do you do? And I said, well, I'm a storyteller. And she just leant in and went, that's a bit pretentious, isn't it? And I just thought, this is a person who's lived under a stone, who's never had a story read to her, who's never gone to a drama, never seen a play, never gone to the cinema, never had a story read to her or anything. And I just felt terribly sorry for her. I also wanted to punch her, but that was a whole other thing, you know.
There's the rugby player in you. You can't hide it.
I'm not-
Which is a physical sport, of course it is. I'm
Yeah.
going to ask you to build on this, because let's just give context to our audience here. The vast majority, perhaps 9 out of 10, said, no, I have never had any formal training. And yet, as you've just shared, stories are everywhere in our lives. When we get home from a day of work, we share with our partner what happened that day in a story form. You're never going to guess what the boss said to me today. So it's innate, but in business, often it doesn't happen. As a professional storyteller, what are your top tips? I mean, you've started already brilliantly in sharing a structure, which I'll come back to later. But what are your top tips, must-haves in a good story?
The hook. You've got to hit the ground running. In a feature film, you've got a bit of time to build the story. I'm in the middle of the London Film Festival at the moment. I went to 3 feature films yesterday. If they don't grab you, the first thing, I'm thinking, oh, what's for lunch? On a short film, you've got to hit the ground absolutely sprinting. There are so many things to distract you on mobile phone, the internet, whatever. And quite a lot of people do 3-screen viewing, which I find completely brain frying. But you've got so many things to keep someone's conversation. How often do you look at Netflix or one of the streamers and you watch the first minute or so and you go, oh, that's boring, and you flick off? Because there is so much content out there. So you've got to hit the ground absolutely steaming. Why should I care about this person? Do I like them? Are they a rounded character? Do they have vulnerabilities as much as talents? What are their needs? What are their wants? And usually you have a thing called a narrative arc, which goes, Joe goes off on a journey. He thinks he wants this, but actually he needs to get that. And he needs to learn that he needs that. And if he doesn't learn, then it's a tragedy. So that's the kind of the key thing is, do I like this character? Do I want to go on the journey with him? Do I understand he, she, that's to be gender fluid? You know, what's the jeopardy? What are the barriers to him getting what he wants? What will change his mind and show him what he needs? Do I care? Do I want to be with him on this journey? Is it interesting? And is there a bad guy who is just as interesting? You have to have what's called a protagonist and antagonist who are equal weight, and they often quite share similar values, but different a black and white version of it. So you have to have a strong balance of goodies and baddies, as being often the baddie is a barrier, an antagonist is a barrier to what he is trying to achieve.
Thank you. And I know you're going to go back to the film festival this afternoon, so we've got you for a tight window. I really appreciate your time. One of the things you talked about there, and it's my language now, but I'll talk again about this later, is establishing a hero. And you said, you know, there's a protagonist as well, but we've got a hero on a journey. Can you tell me a little bit about how to do that? How do you establish fairly early on the hero of your story? What do you do as a writer?
If you look at something, just an example, have anyone seen a film called Ellen Brockovich?
Yeah. Julie Roberts.
Yes. Is it Ellen Brockovich? Erin Brockovich. Right. In the first minute, she's trying to get a job. She breaks a nail. Her car gets shunted. She doesn't get the job. Any number of just thinking, oh God, this poor woman. And actually, you really like her. Within the first minute, a catastrophe of events happens to her, and you go, God, bloody hell! And this is about a woman who's got this determination to beat the big corporations. So you've got to make us like them, and sometimes you grow to like them, and sometimes you never like them. And I think a film where you never like the protagonist, I don't give a head, don't give a monkeys about them, then I think that story fails. And you've got to, and also as a writer, you've got to go. If you think about if you were sitting around a campfire. And you used to have these itinerant storytellers they were often called hair twisters. Don't know why. And they would go, "Come with me on a journey. Come with me. I'll take you to the palaces of the whatever it is." And you go, "Ooh." And all these itinerant storytellers then turned into fairy tales, and you had how stories diverged. So something like Cinderella and King Lear comes from the same root folktale.
This is fascinating for me. So what I'm getting actually is this idea that then you are trying to create, as the storyteller, an emotional connection with the hero in some way.
Yeah.
Because if you're not bothered, you're not actually bothered or connected to the story. So you need to try and find an emotional connection. And fairly early on, I'm getting this idea of...
Oh, yes, you win in the first minute.
Within the first minute.
Yeah.
So if we now talk about business, because you're a storyteller in every context, including convincing people to sponsor your documentary. How would you recommend someone who has limited time? You know, in a film, you might have 30 minutes or an hour and a half, but in the business context, you might only have 2 minutes. What's your recommendation of managing that science you talked about, beginning, middle, and end, fast start, emotional connection, and an outcome? What's your tip for a really smart short story?
Well, I've done that in 10 seconds, as in on a commercial, right? And the scenario was it was for Story Cheaters, glamorous product, and it had a snowman in a hallway, and he says I've been nice and cold all winter situation, but now the owners have gone and installed Story Cheaters, complications, and you see him slowly melt, and then it comes up so you've got it's a sad ending, but complication, situation, resolution is he turns into a puddle, so you can 2 minutes phooey, that's generous time. I've done it in 10 seconds.
Okay, this is really powerful, Ace, because I think there's a temptation and there's a natural energy, I think, to start storytelling and go on tangents and talk about things that aren't particularly relevant to the customer's need in the business context. So this is about being as succinct as possible, using your structure of situation, event, and outcome, and maybe even doing it in 30 seconds or a minute rather than 2 or 3 minutes. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah. No, but you can. But all stories need to have a beginning, middle, and end. It's otherwise they just don't satisfy. They don't land. So you've got to literally grab. There's also a theory when you're writing screenwriting is that you arrive late in a scene and leave early, so that people can, so that's happened now. Oh, okay, they're talking about something that's all just happened. So you actually get on with the story quicker.
Okay, so you need to create attention straight away. You need to create some emotional connection and intrigue, which might be a nemesis of your hero, and then a finish relatively quickly as well.
Yeah,
wow,
and most feature films are 90 minutes, 30. So next time you watch a feature film, look at about the 28, 29. There'll be a change where you've gone to what's called the end of Act 1, when everything changes. So if you take something like Star Wars, the original Star Wars, Luke the hero, the droid arrives. Oh, save me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. He ignores. I thought that's really good. He ignores the call to adventure. That's called the call to adventure, the inciting incident that gets the story going. And then he's forced to take his journey because his aunt and uncle get killed, and he then goes on the training with the Jedi. Right. So that's the end of Act 1. Act 2, you have allies and shapeshifters. They're really interesting characters where you think they're a good guy. Oh, they're not a good guy, and then they are. So they can flip between being a good and a bad guy. And then you get to a point at the end of Act 2 when you have an Act 2 crisis, when it's either all going brilliantly, in which case it'll be a tragic ending, or it's all going terribly. So in a rom-com, the lovers as far apart as they can be at the end of Act 2, and then there's a resolution where the lovers get back together again.
I've heard you say this twice, and I think it's important in a business context that sometimes it's more powerful to have a tragedy and a negative ending to land your message than it's just all positive and roses at the end. You know, the princess marriage.
Too tidy. Sometimes it's too tidy.
So, conscious of your time, I'd love to open up to the audience using chat for me. If there are any specific questions you'd like to ask Alice, use chat for me and I'll ask that question for you. We've got about 2-3 minutes left of Alice's time. The taxi is running. The meter is running. Final top tip for you for this journey from, I've never been trained in this. I'm a little bit nervous of being storyteller because it's not been what I've done for years. What would your top tip be in terms of getting going, starting up?
Well, there's tons of books you can read. I mean, absolutely masses. And storytelling is, there's a lot of people who tell stories, and lots of people who craft stories. So there's different things. I mean, even a joke is a good story. Set up, resolution. It's so all of these things. That's one thing. Also consider how much you can hide a brand personality in a story. A lot of brands are now looking. Not because of standard advertising world, they're not reaching their audiences. They're looking to hide their brand personality in a type of story. So that's a lot of responses of they're looking for experiences that expound their brand story.
Oh, lovely, thank you. And I'm looking at some of the questions here. Do the same rules apply with written stories, e.g., social media, as you've described in terms of the written form and films?
Should do. Otherwise, it's just like this happened. Okay, whatever.
Next question. Can it be something you make up? Veronica's asking, can you make this up? Is it still powerful if it is fiction?
Cool, yeah. I mean, everybody is crying out for the new, most original story ever. At the same time, they're remaking and prequels and blah and blah, which is like snore. But everyone is looking for a surefire hit, and none of them are, know what that is. So, but and then sometimes some of the stuff I get response from my literary agent, like, oh, that's a bit too original. Like, oh. So you can't win.
What are your recommendations? Glenn's asking about, you said there are so many great books on storytelling.
Well, one of the best ones is called The Writer's Journey, which is geared towards screenwriting. It's by a man called Christopher Vogler, like a bird. There's also quite a good one called Save the Cat by Sid Field. Who's Sid Lloyd?
Are you looking at your library above you?
Yes, I am. That's why I'm looking to see what I've got here. But certainly, I use Christopher Vogler as an absolute jobbing book of like, oh, I need this point. And also the other thing to think about narrative threads is like it's like a washing line, and you need to have what are called pinch points that are like pegs that hold the narrative onto the washing line. So what you'll notice when you watch a film next, you'll see it. You'll have a important thing will happen, and then there'll be a bit chit and chat, and something happen, and then there'll be another important thing that happens, and then it's just to keep the attention of the audience. Otherwise, they'll go, oh, what's you got any snacks? What's in the fridge? And you need to do these little things to keep people attached and hooked.
Love that. Love that. And a question about hooks actually came in from Natalie from the US. Natalie's asking, how do you hook an audience that actually is not on your side? So that might be it might be some of the things like Save the Planet, for example, and they just don't think that's a thing. How do you hook an audience that is anti your idea conceptually?
Every time you're writing, you're looking at the audience you're writing for. Who is going to be interested in this story? So when I'm doing a pitch document, the first thing they want to know who's the TMG, the target market group. Who are they, and why should they care? So if you then, and I mean, certainly in advertising, you're not selling features, you're selling benefits. My house has thick walls. Why do I care? Keeps me warm in winter, cold in summer. So you always turn it into something that's of the interest or something that's going to affect them. So for someone who I say environmentally, do you want your children to grow up with microplastics in their blood? So just something that might be, it might be a scary thing, but it's a way of saying, well, this is what we've done. So here's bosh, here's the solution. So you may have to go down a scary rabbit hole to do it, but it might be a way of doing it.
That's fabulous. Thank you. And Alice, I just want to say a huge thank you to you. I know you're about to go to the film festival. One final tip, because you've been fantastic. My job when you leave is to reiterate what you said, by the way, as
Okay.
an expert. One final tip from you to get us going. I asked the question before, but any tips to give us the bravery to use storytelling in a business context?
The thing is, just you have to silence this little person called the sulky kitten of self-doubt. He's a lot like the shitbird. You want to know what a shitbird is?
Yeah, go on.
Well, a shitbird's a bird that sits on your shoulder, looks over and goes, that shit, that shit, that shit. But the sulky kitten of self-doubt is telling you the whole time that every word you're writing is crap, and really you shouldn't be doing it. So you punch this little chappie off your shoulder, and you just write. And all writers are trying to seek something called back brain writing, where you're just writing with such fluidity that you're just doing the typing.
Yeah, that's
And sometimes at the end of the day, I'll get there and go, bloody hell, who wrote that? That's bloody good. Because I've been always remember as well, your brain carries on telling stories when you're asleep. So I'll go to sleep going, how do I get Joe out of that haystack and into the whatever it is? And something will in the morning go, oh, this is how you do it. Or I go to the cinema or to a theatre with a problem in my head, and within 10 minutes, I've been distracted from what I was thinking about. And suddenly, bloody hell, I'm going to write down what this solution is, and I can't do it in the dark. So it's a question of letting your brain relax and just do it. And just kind of don't be self-critical. And the other crucial thing is to leave it, go away, do something else, wash your socks, whatever it is, and come back with a fresh brain. And then when you think it's absolutely the best it can be, leave it one more night. And the next day you'll go, oh no, I can see how to do it better. You need to be, editing is the key, because editing is writing is rewriting. So the first any Muppet can do a first draft, but it's refining it, making it better, using better verbs, stronger verbs. He walked into the room and fell over. Doesn't tell you much about him. He tumbled in, he crept in, he snuck in. It tells you more about his state of mind. So use stronger verbs, what I call hard-working verbs. Don't do have, put, did. Make everything work harder, and actually you'll write more concisely.
This is fabulous stuff. I love the little kitten of self-doubt.
No, he's a sulky kitten.
Sulky little kitten of self-doubt who's just saying, oh, I'm not very good at this.
Yeah.
Or the shitbird. That's
the
nice.
ship, the ship, that shit. Have
So
you not heard of those two? They're rotten. They're just
sulky kitten is the one that conjures for me. And one of the things I notice, and I call out for everyone on the call, is how many images you create as you share answers to my questions, your storytelling, and you're creating pictures in our mind. So I really thank you for that. Thank you for the inspiration. My job, as I said, as you take the taxi to the film festival, is to reiterate pretty much everything you've said and make it tangible so that our audience can apply it. So
I'll show you one other thing I have above my desk.
Please do.
Eel.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a realist, is Eel. He knows his stuff.
Knows his stuff. Enjoy the rest of the film festival.
I need to run away. Good to chat, everybody. See you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
That was awesome. Thank you. It's a quick quiz, everybody, now, and it's going to reinforce some of the things that Ace has just shared with us. Quick quiz using chat to put your answers in, please. And I know we've got one group with 8 people in the room in Switzerland, so you can have a collective view on the answers. Question number 1, all relevant to storytelling, of course. Question number 1. And this is psychologists. They argue a bit of the exact percentage, but what percentage of our self-talk, what we say to ourselves, is negative? Using a percentage, what percentage of the self-talk we have of ourselves is naturally negative? Leonore's 30, 80, 70, 80, 65, 65, 75, 90, couple of 90s in there. Wowzers, wowzers. Brenda Dempsey's absolutely right. The answer is interesting because I do a little bit of work with psychologists, and there is a debate. There's two camps about the exact percentage. One camp says it's 91%, and the other camp says it's much more like 94%. So the debate is not, is it 9 out of 10%? Is it 90% or 94? So the answer is most. A vast majority of what we say to ourselves is negative. So whether that's a sulky pussycat or a shit bird, it might well be saying to you, don't be a storyteller. You don't need to. You seem to be successful without it. Seems too much like hard work. It's risky. You won't feel comfortable like that bloke who told the story about the Japanese customer he'd never met before. And he went straight into story unconventionally. I wouldn't want to do that. So that was question number one. Question number two, when you make a presentation business to business, 1 hour after you have finished speaking, what does the science tell us about how much of the words you used is remembered by your audience? It's a percentage again. What percentage is remembered by your audience 1 hour after you've finished presenting? I'm getting very low numbers here. And some of them are right on the money. So I'm exactly right. The answer by science is 7%. 7% by science. There are exceptions. But why is that? Comes back to what Ace was saying. We don't start fast and get attention, full attention. After we've started and the energy of the audience starts to drop, we don't hook them again. Do you remember she talked about a red thread where you've got lots of moments where you're re-energizing and surprising your audience? So it's very, very low, sadly. So we need to change how we present. Tell more stories. Here's a question specific to storytelling. If you tell a relevant story, keyword relevant, if you tell a relevant story to your audience, 1 week after you have told that story in a business context, what percentage of your audience can recount it? Can say, this is the story I was told 1 week ago. What percentage can recount the story? Yeah, we're a range of about 20 to 80. The answer is 2/3. It's about 68%. So 1 week after you've told a relevant story, it can be repeated by your audience because it resonated with them. Pretty amazing. Next and final question. What percentage of the decisions we make are led by emotion? What percentage of the decisions we make in life as adults now, everyone on this call's an adult, is led by emotion, not intellect? George is saying 80, Lynn is 80, Peter 80, 85, 90, 80, 88, 90, 70. Well, you're all right. The answer is a vast majority. It's nearly 90% emotional. And what psychologists again tell us is that what we do if we're smart, intelligent people with maturity is that our first instinct is emotional and then we justify it intellectually. And the reason I'm doing that is fact, fact, fact. But actually it's the emotion that drives the decision. Now, the reason that's the last question in the quiz is because what storytelling does to make a difference is it connects with your audience emotionally as well as intellectually. That's the difference that makes the difference. It gets to the heart as well as the head. So I'm hoping the story I told about connecting with a Japanese business, very formal, very traditional, by going straight into story, I hope that you felt what that might feel like. Online, total strangers, completely different culture, Asian culture, Europeans, completely different. And the strategy of story first is radical. So I hope in telling that, you start to put yourself in the shoes of Chester, myself, and Ken, and you think, oh, that would, ooh, risky, awkward. Oh, would I do that? Oh, I'm not sure I would. So it's connecting ideally with emotions, not just the intellectual connection. So that's the purpose of storytelling and the power. A study recently by Stanford University, completed in 2024, so very recent, worked out the retention percentage between fact-only business presentation and stories bringing those facts to life. And the retention level, a bit like Remember the Story a Week Later, was 22 times more retention if the facts and details are in a story, in a relevant story. 22 times more retention. So that's why storytelling is not a nice to have. It's an essential. So I'm going to now reiterate some of the things that Ace said and bring them to life for you. Remember, my purpose is to inspire you to think, I must be a storyteller. If I haven't been in business before, I now must be. So I'm hopefully being provocative enough to make you think, okay, be bold and start doing this. So the first one, and Alice talked a lot about hero establishment in her story writing. Establish the hero and maybe the anti-hero, and they go on a journey. The hero's journey is great storytelling. But I want to complement the idea of a hero by stretching your thinking beyond the human. Because the hero could be your brand. That's not a person. It's a thing, right? So I'd like you to think much more broadly about the hero as a business storyteller. And I'm going to give you the 5 Ps. The 5 Ps that could be a story hero. So it could be your brand, could be the product, could be a person, could be you, could be a member of your staff, lovely. Could be a principal, could be a place, might be specific to the pain point of the customer. So those are the 5 Ps of hero. And I'd just like you to think really broadly. What hero are you trying to establish? And what's the journey that hero goes on? Could be the brand story from beginning to now. Look how far we've come. We started with Ace talking about women's rugby. When I first got involved in women's rugby, it was 1982. And for the first 20 years, if you played women's rugby internationally, which lots of my friends and my wife did, you paid for it yourself. You're an international player, but you pay for your flights, you pay for your hotel, you pay for everything yourself, amateur sport. You're now looking at fully paid professionals with 82,000 people paying a lot of money to go and watch women's rugby. That is a journey. And the hero is probably women's rugby. It could be the pioneers like Ace, could be. But I think it's more the sport becomes the hero. Or is it women? The principle that women are amazing at elite sport and are worth paying money to watch. Could be the principle. So be clear about your hero. That's important. The next thing that Alice said, and I'm going to use specifically some language from Mike Adams. So Amanda, my colleague and friend, has worked with Mike, and therefore that's why she recommended this book to me. And there are some things in this that enhance what Alice said, that a story has a beginning, middle, and end. And actually, the language that is used by Mike Adams is this. And Alice mentioned hook. Get full attention straight away. But this is the analogy, of course, of fishing, that you could use the story to hook at the start, or you could use it to handle a pushback. The customer says, oh, I'm not sure. So I'm using a story to manage and win the fight, or I'm using it to close the deal and land the fish. And it does remind me, I went fishing with my dad when I was a kid, and he was a keen fisherman and I wasn't. And we went marlin fishing in the open water. And I can remember it, dramatic. But the most dramatic was the fight. A marlin fish, so powerful, so strong, so independent, so resistant. And so that word really resonates with me, because customers, our business partners, might be as determined not to be kept on that hook. So the story has to be relevant to that. Now, some key tips for me, actually from Mike Adams. So hook stories. Mike Adams was an engineer, a bit like the first story I talked to you about, the sales engineer in Chicago driving 6 hours to North Michigan. And he was a sales engineer, Mike Adams, and he was struggling to sell. And he thought, I've got to try different methods because I'm not hitting my targets, not making any money. And he thought, oh, and he tried a story and he got a sale. And then he thought, oh, storytelling might be a thing. I'm going to use it more. And because he was an engineer and very rigorous, he came up with 7 stories or 7 types of story all the way through the customer exchange. And so I'm just going to bring these words to life for you a little bit using Mike Adams's theory. So he said, hook stories could be a personal story. I landed at Chicago Airport, 5 a.m. Could be a personal story. Could be about a key member of staff. Could be about company creation. Could be about your company and how it began. Could be a company creation story to hook interest from the start. Bite stories could be insight stories or success stories. So here's an insight, a revelation, a surprise insight story, or it could be a success story. And land stories, and this is getting a yes, closing the sale if it's a sales call, land stories, values story, principles and values, or teaching story, a lesson from the story, which is making someone say, oh yeah, I don't want to be like that, or I do want to be like that. And the answer is yes. So 7 separate stories that can be at any stage along your journey. So bringing to life a lot of the things that Alice was saying, reiterating them, growing them a little bit in your minds. And as I said, my purpose is to, first of all, inspire to say, I'm going to be a storyteller. Some of the input now is around how do you do it brilliantly? And one of the things Alice said, I think is incredibly powerful. I did it in 10 seconds when I wrote an advert and the snowman melted. And what I loved about that example is how short and impactful, visually, with emotion, right? We've got emotion. We get to know our hero is a snowman, but the heating's so good he melts. That's good enough for me. And 10-second advert. Memorable, visual, powerful, retained. So as business people, how short can we make it? Attention spans are not great. We're using this for impact. So maximum length of a business story, 90 seconds. Maximum length. Story I told at the beginning of this call, about 80 seconds. Possibly a bit long. Arguably, need to look at the video back and see, did it resonate with my audience enough to warrant 80 seconds? Don't know. Have to see. The other thing that Alice said, I'm going to reiterate it because it's powerful. 3 steps. Alice used the word situation. I use the word context. A boy was stuck up a tree. There's the context. The event, people were throwing rocks. The outcome, he found a way to get down without being hit by a rock. So context, event, outcome. And the key thing in the context or in the situation, you're establishing the hero. You're establishing the hero right away. And in what situation or context? The boy was up the tree. Done. People were throwing rocks. How did he survive that? Here was the solution. So it's a 3-step process. At Uspire, we use CEO because it's easy to remember those letters. Also because the E for event, what happened, what was the experience, is also E for emotion. How did it feel? Bring those emotions to life. So the boy was really scared. He was frightened of injury and he was frightened of ridicule. Okay, I'm now feeling like that person might feel myself, and we're making an emotional connection. So we like to use CEO as a structure to storytell. Now, here's my question to everybody on the call, and we've got a lovely number of people, over 50, which is magical. We've got the 8 in one room, so I'm expecting excellence in answer to this. Here's the question I'd like you to ponder. How specifically are you going to apply storytelling? It's quite provocative because I'm assuming you want to, right? So it's an assumption. But in a business context, how specifically do you intend to apply storytelling with the rigor with which Alice has shared what good looks like? How specifically do you intend to apply storytelling in your business meetings? So I'm going to give you a good solid 90 seconds to consider that, to type it, and to put it on chat. Once you've done that, look at others' answers. Okay, so it's a 90-second break for you to think and type how specifically now that you've heard from Alice and from Mike Adams, will you apply storytelling in your business meetings? Yeah, this is lovely. Glenn's point is, have always done it. What I'm hoping for those who are by nature storytellers consciously is that it sharpens the saw, right? Oh, I could try that, or maybe I need to make a stronger emotional connection, or maybe I need to do it shorter. So I love that, Glenn. I love that, Alan. So Alan Stracy is someone who runs his own business, and it's brilliant business, by the way. It's helping people with ADHD be successful in a world where most of the people they're trying to influence do not have ADHD. So I love that, Alan. That's magical. Yeah, Bertrand, you run your own business as well. So preparing the sales pitch, convincing stakeholders, difficult working relations. I think it's awesome to use storytelling to highlight this relationship matters to me and it needs to be better. Love that. Lou is talking about we're not very good. Yeah, and there's a couple of things to say about that. One of the things that we do at Uspire, we love to work with organizations that have the aspiration to be storytellers, because that's a journey and it'll be different by context. You know, where do you start from? What's your journey? What's your product? It'll always be different, but we love working with organizations that aren't yet great storytellers. Yeah, Sylvain's talking about team workshops, customer interactions. Practice this. If you want to make a new skill one of your superpowers, it's through determined focused practice. Jamie's talking about use visuals. I mean, interestingly, I've done handheld visuals, and it's deliberate and conscious that be quick with this, but at least visualize it. So it is a stronger image than just listening to my words. PowerPoint's a good way to do it, as long as it's not too wordy. Conciseness, Katie, yeah, it's fascinating this. It's so difficult, isn't it? When you're passionate about your business and what you do, the temptation to talk a lot is high. And if you put yourself in the shoes of the audience, what will grab attention, what will keep attention, and what will leave a lasting legacy of action? And that determines say less, better. Yeah, visuals and graphics, absolutely crucial. Visuals and graphics. If you can tell a story that brings to life pictures in people's brains, it triggers the heart more. So this idea of a bird on the shoulder saying things like, "You're not very good," that worked for me because visually I will remember that. Or the pussycat, the sulky pussycat, love that. Practice it. Peter's saying practice that first 15 or 20 seconds. If you don't rehearse, your confidence level will be low when you do it for real. These are great, by the way. Yeah, I love this point from Joe. As human beings, we're storytellers by nature every single day. And this is about transferring it into a business context. Start strong with a hook. I started with a story. So Chris introduced me and said over to Mark. And I started with, I landed in Chicago. So this is not, hello, welcome, my name is, it's none of that. It's attention straight away. Why is he telling this story? Why is it resonating with me? Tone of voice, self-confidence. This is great stuff. Yeah, this is fabulous. This is great stuff. So I thank you for resonating with this topic. As I said at the start, I'm still working on this. And I reckon it's 5 years of practice now, and I'm a lot older than that. And I've not been a conscious storyteller except in the last 5 years of my business life. So this is still an ongoing learning journey. And I just wanted to call that out because I've been successful as an influencer in my life, and I'm happy with that, and I'm in a good place. Can I be more successful if I tell appropriate stories? 100% yes. And thanks to one of the people on this call, my publisher, Brenda's on this call. Brenda, you are a rock star. I have put a number of stories in a book, would you believe? I've written a book, which is coming out next month, and it's called The Captaincy. And it's 60 stories about amazing leaders. And I call them captains, hence The Captaincy. And that helped me think more about how important storytelling is. Because the book could have just been, here's all my insight about leadership, which frankly would have made me bored, let alone the audience. So I just thought, wouldn't it be magical to tell stories of amazing people who exhibit the characteristics and behaviors of what I think great leaders should? And so, is this a plug for my book? Yes, it is. So, and there's just stories in it. So they follow, I hope, CEO as a flow, bit of context, something that happened to them and the outcome and their behaviors. So final thoughts from me. I'm going to tell you a story. I was sitting with a business leader who was trying to influence another business leader. So two separate businesses, two leaders, and one's the salesperson and the other is the decision maker of the customer. And genuinely, I felt awkward sitting in that room because they were not connecting. It was painful as well. I wanted to shrink. It was so awkward. And then the salesperson who was trying to convince the other leader said, I'm not doing a good job here, am I? I'm not doing a good job. I pride myself in customer centricity and all those sorts of things. And I'm missing completely connecting with you. Can you tell me why that is? Now, notice what this was. That was an invite to tell a story. And the CEO of this major German business said, okay, let me give you more background about where I am as a business leader and what my challenge is. And he told a very emotionally personal story, which was heart-wrenching to listen to, amazing for me as a fly on the wall. And it transformed that meeting from cold and disconnected to completely emotionally as one. And that was a good 15 years ago. I remember it physically. The hairs on my arm are standing up because of the impact an amazing, impromptu, authentic story had. I hope that inspires you to be brilliant business storytellers. Thank you for being with me on this call, and have an amazing afternoon wherever you are in the world.